Well, hello everyone. Thank you all for coming. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending where you are. My name is George Heritage. I work in the Assessment Services Department in the Madrid office. And Victoria, where are you?
I'm right here. Hello.
And this?
Hello, my name is Victoria, and I work with yours in the Assessment Services Department in the Madrid office.
And hello if this is your first webinar, and hello again if it's not.
Let's get started. Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the assessment of reading and listening online.
Excellent. So first, we're just going to ask a couple of questions about your context to get an idea of how you all feel about the topic and what platforms you're using. And unlike speaking and writing, which seem like they would possibly be harder to assess online, we think reading and listening, we're not really changing what we're testing or how we're testing it. It's how, potentially, depending on the platform and what approaches you take. But we're going to have a real think about what we're actually testing at different levels, the different task types we use to test those. And we'll take you through a couple of examples of using resources. We don't want this to just be an hour of us giving you resource. We'll look at some at the end, and there will be some on the handout for you. Okay, so firstly, there'll be a poll on the right-hand side. We'd just like you to tell us how confident you feel assessing reading and listening online. That should pop up now. Interesting to see what the answers are. We did this on Tuesday. The majority were confident. Excellent. Very similar. Actually, more people are very confident this time. That is good to know. If you're not so confident, hopefully today will help you. And another poll, just for interest, which platforms are you using? Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Google Hangout, Google Classroom, Skype, or anything else? We'll try to bear some of these in mind as we go through. Yeah, the majority is Zoom. We've been hearing lots of good things about Zoom, especially breakout rooms and things like that. Okay, lovely. So, Victoria.
What are we testing?
Exactly. Expand.
Yes, we are going to be looking at some CFR levels to start introducing the skills that the skills and the sub-skills that we are going to test, in this case, online.
Excellent. So in the chat box, we have 4 here. The easiest thing is to write the number and then the level. These are 4 CFR levels from A2 up to C1. Mm-hmm. So in the chat box, if you'd like a quick go at that, so 1, B2, 2, C1, etc. Where do these can-do statements come from, Victoria?
They come from the CFR, the Common European Framework of Reference. You can see the link on screen. And it is a document produced by the Council of Europe in collaboration with different exam boards. And
we have been talking about these throughout nearly all of our webinars, so I'm sorry if you've heard it before. But the document is made up of can-do statements at each level. So it clearly describes what students are expected to be able to do at each level. And I think bearing these in mind throughout all of our teaching is a really nice approach, a nice strategy, a nice way to plan things. But especially in terms of assessment, is our activity showing that the student can do this? Okay, so here are the answers. B1, B2, A2, C1. 2 of them are what, Victoria?
I got them all right.
Oh, well done. Congratulations. 2 of these are from listening. So number 2, the B2 can understand spoken language, live or broadcast on both familiar and unfamiliar topics, normally encountered in personal, social, academic, or vocational life. And what's the other listening one? A2. Phrases and expressions related to areas of most immediate priority, provided speech is clearly and slowly articulated. And the other two from B1 and C1, I think what's interesting at B2, and even more so at C1 and above, we see at B2 familiar and unfamiliar topics normally encountered in a variety of situations. I think we can really start using more authentic material at B2, from C1 up, even more so, which does make finding material to use for reading and listening activities easier, I think. So in terms of receptive skills, how can we get there, Victoria? How do we help our students progress?
Yeah, we need to help them learn, acquire new vocabulary, and be able to use it well. Also, develop strategies for reading quickly, which is also useful and relevant for listening. Understanding grammatic structures, also developing strategies for anticipating content. Prediction is vital both in reading and listening, and understanding referencing, and of course developing strategies for dealing with unknown words.
And that last one especially, we would say from A2 upwards. The texts are much shorter, we know, but we've all had those students who get to a word they don't know and just go and stop. Obviously, it becomes increasingly important at higher levels, but really trying to help students practice figuring out meaning from context and not sort of freaking out when they do find a word they don't know. We were going to ask you just to put which two of these do you think are the most important, but I don't think we have time now. I don't think there's any real correct order for these. I think there's interplay between all of them. Some might be more relevant at lower levels, learning vocabulary, understanding grammar, perhaps when we're really focusing in on something, but that is also tested at the higher levels, but in a wider context of skills and things that they need to do for the activity or the task. So beyond this, thinking about different ways that we read and listen. So Victoria, which skills would you use? What kind of reading would you use when you are reading a timetable, for example?
I suppose I would be scanning for specific information, and if I'm looking for specific time that I need, so scanning probably.
Okay. Watching the news, I think it would probably be a mixture. You're probably doing some gist listening to get a general idea, but then if something interesting comes on, you'll be zoning in, listening for detail, listening for more specific detail. And a lecture at university, Victoria?
Depending on your purpose, but I suppose that if you are going to sit an exam afterwards, you will be interested in details and as much specific information as possible.
Exactly. It depends on the subject, depends on the lecturer. I had a lot of very different approaches to giving lectures when I was at university, as I'm sure we all did. So going a bit further and breaking these down, different types of reading, Victoria?
Yes, we have, on the one hand, we have careful reading, which is linear and usually slow. And then fast reading, which includes skimming, scanning, and search reading.
Victoria drew that lovely picture of scan. With so yeah, skimming, reading quickly to get a general overall idea, scanning for specific information, and search, being able to use a variety of different types of reading to either locate the paragraph you're looking for or more specific detail. Listening, again, listening for gist to get an overall idea of what they're talking about, maybe an overall idea of the structure of what they're saying. Listening for details and specific information, which in some exam tasks, very specifically, we are asking for a certain bit of information. So we need to give our students opportunities to practice all of these and hopefully make sure that we're testing these in the tasks and the activities that we use for assessment. So what have we looked at, Victoria? What we are trying to show that the students can do on quite a general level.
Yes.
And then breaking down the sub-skills of reading and of listening. What else do we have to think about when we're designing activities for assessment?
Yeah, we need to think about what is going on in students' minds and cognitive processes that are going on while they are listening and reading.
Exactly, and this will then affect the time that you set for a task. So I think really thinking what the students are being asked to do will affect how much time they have. If it's a very long text and we're encouraging them to scan, we'll probably give them less time. So we don't want them to be reading everything in detail, especially at the higher levels in our exams. Some of the task types are designed to A, be boring, and so they don't get too involved, and B, they don't have much time. When we're testing scanning or looking for specific information, the text will be very long because we don't want them reading everything, reading the question, reading everything. We want them to be try and encourage them to be using these sub-skills. So cognitively speaking, we're going to look at one of my favorite poems in the whole world, which is by Lewis Carroll from Alice Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found Out, which is the sequel to Alice in Wonderland. And 80% of this poem is nonsense. It's beautiful, wonderful nonsense, but it is nonsense. So we'd like you to have a go at task 1. What did the toves do? So 'twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome raths outgrabe. So what did the toves do? They wabed, they gyred and gimbled, or they brilligged? What do we say? Excellent. Yes, of course they did. What do they do, Victoria?
They gyred and gimbled?
Gyred and gimbled. Lovely. Okay, so that's task 1. We all got the right answer pretty rapidly. Task 2, Victoria? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
That was the answer. And now question 2 is, which word describes the wraths?
Sorry, I was just having a little drink. Oh no, I thought there were options. Make sure, as teachers, when you're assessing, you don't give them the answer before they've done the activity. That's always a good idea. Yes, well done, everyone. It is mome, the mome rats. Task 3, you can control the slides for this, Victoria. I think it's much safer. Right, there we are. Question 3, the next part of the poem. Have a quick read of that. And what did the sun in this poem intend to do? A, he intended to play with the Jabberwock. B, he intended to take a nap under the tum-tum tree. Or C, intended to attack the Jabberwock. Exactly, Alexander. Mome is an adjective. C, most people are going with C. Excellent. So, task 1, task 2, and task 3. Which of those 3 tasks was the most challenging? So the first one we all got very quickly. How did we get the answer to the first one, Victoria?
Yeah, by understanding how sentences are built, are structured in English. So by using our knowledge of syntax.
Yeah, parts of speech, syntax, etc. We only focused on the words which weren't nonsense, and we got the answer very quickly. Task 2, Victoria?
Very similar, just considering the order of word order in English. So we know that adjectives usually precede nouns.
Exactly. So that was very much sort of use of English even. I mean, at A2 and B1, we only have a reading paper or a reading and writing paper. So a lot of at higher levels, what is split into use of English is very much part of our understanding of reading. And yes, task 3, we think was the most challenging. Task 3 was reading to infer. So it was reading what was not explicitly stated. So we ignored the nonsense words, vorpal and manxum, and by means of inference, by inferring the implicit, we all got answer C. So there are very different cognitive processes and different skills that we're focusing on in each of those tasks. What's next, Victoria? Oh yeah, bearing all of this in mind when designing tasks.
Other aspects, yes, or taking all this into account when it comes to design a task to assess task difficulty. So in this case, looking at the topic and type of information included, less difficult tasks usually involve personal, familiar, concrete information and topics, and topics where no specialist knowledge is required. When we want to make them a bit more challenging, we're going to be looking at non-personal and familiar abstract topics, or some areas in which specialist knowledge is required.
But I just want to cut in with the specialist knowledge. We do design all of our exams so that no background knowledge per se is required. As far as possible, everything is focusing exclusively on their English language skills. So we have to bear this in mind. And if we go back to the can-do statements at the beginning, all of this is reflected quite clearly in the bits that we highlighted in the can-do statements. Abstract, in particular, abstract really sort of comes in at B1. Do you agree, Victoria? Sort of gently. I think if you look at the word lists, we have published word lists for A2, well, all of the young learners, then A2 key and B1 preliminary. And I think a new lexical set comes in at preliminary, emotions, feelings, etc. Because when we're beginning to speak about more abstract things, it becomes more linguistically challenging. In terms of language, less difficult, again, simple sentences, short sentences, high frequency words. And more difficult, obviously, more complex, longer sentences and more sophisticated words like sophisticated. Next, Victoria. Discourse mode, I can't talk about this. Over to you.
when discourse mode involves like the structures and also the type of the discourse, of course. So simple text structure and language makes the task less demanding, and also description, narration, and instruction are common discourse modes when at lower levels. When we want to make the task more challenging, we're going to make the structure slightly more complex and also the language. We are still going to have description, narration, and instruction, but we are also going to add exposition and argumentation.
Anything on exposition, argumentation, Victoria? Victoria likes arguing, and she's very good at backing up her arguments. So it's a lot to bear in mind when we're thinking about what we're testing. The language, the content, the topic, the cognitive processes that they're going to have to be doing within an exam or an assessment situation. So yeah, it's a lot to bear in mind, and we should try and keep all of these aspects in mind when trying to design tasks and activities. So there's a quick look at what are we testing. We're going to have a look now at how are we testing. So quickly in the chat box, we've spoken about a lot of this before, but anything else that you can add? So when we're creating reading and listening tasks, what else should we be aware of? Beyond things like complexity of language, what other things should we be aware of when we're creating these tasks? Exposition would be the development of an idea, exposing, going into more detail or depth of a statement or an idea. An argumentation, arguing towards a point. So it's building. How can I express this, Victoria? Can you help me? It's a more complex, multifaceted, or multi-layered exposition of an idea or of a topic. David might be able to help, or he might be busy. Right, so we've got a lot here. Level, obviously, proficiency. Familiarity with topics, yes. We don't want, as I said, in our exams, we try and make sure there's no background knowledge. And beyond that, I mentioned briefly, some of our tasks are boring by design. So we don't want them to get too interested. They've got to be familiar and accessible. But if we're testing their language, the focus needs to be on the language. Time, definitely, lots of different things. We came up with a variety. So again, what we've spoken about, the aspects of the skill that we're assessing and making sure that we're hopefully not testing too many different things at once. Sometimes that's useful, but it can make it easier, harder afterwards for us to mark and to assess. Again, the characteristics of the input material, how complex that is. Scoring, how we score questions, whether it's all going to be 1 point per question, will be different weighting for different areas. Teaching online, the limitations of the platform that you're using, obviously you have to factor this in. More ideas, Victoria?
Yes, the advantages and disadvantages of different task types. We are going to look at that in a bit more detail now, because there is no task type that is perfect. So we need usually a variety of them to have a balance. Of course, our participants were talking about students' characteristics, their age, for example, also is relevant, and assessing students at different levels of ability. That also needs to be borne in mind.
Exactly, it depends on your groups. And I mean, even our sort of level specific tests, our qualifications, include some upward and downward certification afterwards, but upward and downward focus. So if you do very well on B1 preliminary, you will get a certificate saying that you've shown competences at B2. So all of our tasks, the majority, let's say 80% are sort of pitched at B1, but we know that there's a variety within B1. And then some will go up into the lower half of B2 and likewise into the top end of A2. So if students don't quite get the B1, they still get a certificate saying A2. So trying to bear that in mind as well can be difficult. Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, I was more or less wrong. So let's have a look at some different task types. None of these should be unfamiliar to you. We use a lot of these. So we'll look at multiple choice, and a big favorite, the world round. Multiple matching, considerably more complicated for the student and to create. True, false, or right, wrong, doesn't say. That adds a really nice extra layer to a typical binary true, false task, because they really have to focus and make sure that it hasn't stated yes or no. And our very traditional gapped text tasks with missing words, very much looking at use of English. Sentences, paragraphs, so looking again more at sort of structure, cohesion, coherence, and fixed answer options. You can have multiple choice gaps as well. So productive task types as well, where they have no support, short answer questions, and integrated reading and writing, or reading and speaking, or listening and speaking tasks. So Victoria, multiple choice advantages.
Yeah, they have some advantages. They are more or less easy to construct. Of course, you need to take into account the difficulty of the distractors, and this needs to be carefully planned. They are for sure quick to administer and mark. They are objective. They can cover a wide range of reading skills and listening skills, and they allow for multiple observations of each aspect of ability. However, they also have disadvantages. George?
Receptive skills only, really, for multiple choice. It's not a real life task. I mean, when do we find ourselves maybe reading a menu? Do you think that would be a real life multiple choice task? They're obviously open to guessing. So there's always that, if it's a four choice multiple choice, you're always going to have 25% chance of getting it right. And we feel that can have a negative impact on teaching and learning because it's not reflecting real life skills. They're not, I mean, obviously they have their advantages and dysfunctions, as we said. Something like reading, you would never be able to test, or reading and writing, you'd never be able to test spelling in a multiple choice task, for example. I know a lot of some countries or some contexts use multiple choice exclusively, but standalone, for testing language, I don't know how useful just multiple choice is. Information transfer, again, advantages is relatively realistic. It's more realistic. And the test can understand, the test can test the understanding of process, classification, narrative sequence. Disadvantages, Victoria?
There needs to be clear guidance for task completion. So you really need to tell your students how they're going to be assessed, and give them clear criteria. And they should, of course, be aware of it. So these are two very important points to bear in mind when having these types of tasks.
Integrated skills tasks, advantages, they're realistic. If you've been to any of our sessions recently, we've been talking a lot about integrated skills, especially at high levels. It's much more natural and realistic. It's motivating. You can use a variety of listening and speaking, reading and writing skills and processes. And it's more like learning than sort of old school testing. Can be a bit inefficient. Again, they're harder to score, harder to mark, can involve much more subjective judgment. And there's always the possibility of cross-task contamination or cross-ability contamination. So if we are just trying to test scanning, for example, but we're using an integrated skills task, some type, or listening and speaking is probably a better example. Our speaking tests obviously involve a degree of listening as well. So you're not necessarily focusing on just one skill. There's always going to be a combination in integrated skills tasks. Is that it for this section, Victoria? Yes. Conclusion. So, Victoria?
So there is no best way to test comprehension, and no right or wrong task type, because as we've seen, each of them has its own advantages and limitations, and each is suitable for different purposes. So the best solution would be to try and have a variety of task types to avoid advantaging or disadvantaging our learners, and also to allow for a coverage of a broad range of reading skills and listening skills.
Exactly. And if you look at the way our tests are constructed, they do have a nice variety of different task types. We feel that's the best way to cover all of the can-do statements we were talking about. And Anna, information transfer could be a variety of things. I mean, if you think back to the old A2 key, you'd have, let's say a sign. Was that the format, Victoria? You could, for example, have a short text and you have to complete notes, or listening to an answer phone message and having to complete notes on that answer phone message, or vice versa. You're given visual information and you then have to turn that into a message. So it's taking some information and re-representing it depending on the skill that you're focusing on. So we're going to have a look at some of our task types. None of them should prove very surprising to you. We're going to look at what they're actually focusing on. So this is a very traditional reading, A2 reading part 1, the short sign, and 3 options. So what is the answer to this very quickly in the chat box? I don't think we have time to go through all of them. But even at this level, you can notice that the 2 incorrect answers, the distractors, are tempting. There's a lot of crossover, like language-wise, with the notice itself. Obviously, the higher we get, the more tempting the distractors have to be, which is why, in some ways, multiple choice can become quite challenging to create at higher levels to keep the wrong answers tempting enough. Well done, everybody. It's a B. And yes, what are we actually testing in this, Victoria? What's the actual focus of the test linguistically, the task?
In this case, we are looking at modal verbs, so must and can, and also relative clauses, basic ones at this level.
So here's A2. If we move up a bit to B1, we've got longer input text here. probably 40 words, 30 words, something like that. And it's a multiple choice sentence completion, is the question. Is getting a bit more complex here. The answer here, Victoria, what's Harry?
B.
B, well done.
Get some attention.
Get some attention. And what are we testing? More complex again?
Yeah, they need to understand the use of words that have a similar meaning in context. So guess and think here, and also notice and get some attention.
Excellent. So testing a few things there. It's a simple looking task. We're testing quite a few different things in the same task. Listening, again, quite short input, but all the options are mentioned. Soup, cake, and chicken. Maybe a chicken soup. No, that would be unfair. The answer here is soup. And what are we focusing on? What are we testing here, Victoria?
Yeah, here they need to focus on time references. So last week, this time, tonight, and also it, referring to soup, and that the I in the final sentence refers to the mother and not the girl. And they also need to understand the use of present continuous with future meaning. So quite a lot.
Yeah, and this again, this is A2, but we're testing quite a few different things in this relatively simple task. So very useful for testing different areas. Moving up to B1, again, we've got another dialogue, slightly longer. It's a little bit of listening to infer here. I think it's not quite as cut and dry. Realistic characters, and we need to understand how the two friends express partial disagreement, and that seems really true to life and reminds me of, are here similar to realistic. So again, quite a lot going on in what on the face of it is quite a simple task. So doing this online, Victoria, talk us through.
Yeah. Doing this online and maybe with a task that is more suitable for younger learners. So in this case, we are going to ask our students to watch a video. We are going to introduce the topic with a picture, asking them to look at the picture and try to answer some questions to get them to trying to anticipate some of the content in the video, some of the vocabulary that they are going to find, and to also to get them interested. Once this speaking part, which is like the warm-up for the activity, has ended, they are ready to watch the video. They can watch it once and then twice to answer the questions. And in this case, George, I think you have created a wonderful Kahoot.
Yes, we used Kahoot for this. Kahoot is a wonderful tool for lots of different task types. And I think there will be a webinar soon based exclusively on using Kahoot in the class. What we did for us, again, a simple multiple choice. We put together how many? 4 or 5 different questions. So if you haven't used Kahoot, you can go in. You can create a multiple choice task like this. You can set a time limit. Lots of great functionality here. So I put the 3 options there. Nice 3-option multiple choice. I think I got the answer wrong. Victoria told me last time because I didn't watch the video. Put together that task, and then you click on Add Question, and it gives you a variety of options for your next task type. So quiz is the traditional multiple choice with 2, 3, or 4 options. A true or false task, it doesn't have true, false, or doesn't say, but you could do that in the multiple choice. What else? Open-ended. So I think we could use that for productive tasks. Students can type the answer. One really big advantage there, I think, which I said earlier, you can't get with multiple choice, is the spelling aspect. You have to make the decision whether the spelling has to be correct. And I think on the open-ended task for Kahoot, you can have a selection of options. And if you look at some of the answer keys to our lower level exams, the reading and writing papers, the spelling always has to be correct, even at young learners starters. But at listening, there's a little bit more leeway because we're aware that we're testing their listening. We're not testing their spelling. Their spelling is tested in other parts of the exam. So you bear that in mind, especially when listening. I think they're listening for specific information. Have they heard the word? Do they know what it means? Is that more important than their spelling? It depends on the focus. And they also introduced this new puzzle option, which would be great for reordering texts or maybe gap fill situations. I haven't played with it a huge amount, but it does look quite exciting. So once you've created your questions, if you haven't used it before, you run the quiz, a pin comes up and the students can type that in either on their phones, tablets, or on the computer, and you run the quiz in real time. Here the question comes up, and then on their device they get the options and the different colors, so they choose the color that they need. I managed to get that one right, but apparently Victoria told me it was wrong. I was only playing with myself, so I did quite well. There you go. Just clicking you through. Again, here's another question, and you get the options up there, and on their device, they'll get the options, the multiple choice options. It's a really nice way to add a bit of a bit of gamification into your classroom. I mean, it's essentially exactly the same as sitting down and doing a multiple choice test on paper, but the situations we're in now, it's a really nice tool to use. So congratulations to me, I won playing against myself. So there's an idea I think I didn't mention at the beginning, but I think one way to perhaps help with a lot of us are a bit concerned at the moment about cheating and about making sure students aren't using the dictionaries, etc. Using multiple platforms to do things like Padlet, I think is a wonderful platform for input, for brainstorming, for lead-in activities, lead-out activities, but then involving Kahoot, and we're practicing their real-life skills as well, I think. And Monica, yes, it all depends what you do with it. I mean, I've used Kahoot for pub quizzes in our office. It all depends how you use it. But I think it's a great resource. And as I was saying, a nice lead-out activity from this, Victoria?
Yeah.
Ooh, that was Madonna.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. She gets very excited.
Yes, in this case, the lead-out activity was to tell a story. So to make it easier for our students, we were taking screenshots of the main points in the story, and they can either tell you the story or work together to tell the story in a breakout room if you're using Zoom, or they can write their story collaboratively on a Padlet.
Yeah, and a lot of people, this is exactly what we wanted, and I hope we said at the beginning, made it clear, we don't have time to go over lots of different resources. Oh, my chair is breaking. We don't have time to go over lots of different resources. We use Kahoot as an example. Quizlet is amazing, Socrative, Plicker's Quizes, I haven't heard of that either, but we'd like you to sort of share what you're all using as well. We don't have time to look at lots of different ones. So yeah, by all means, please put your ideas in the chat box as well. There's no right answer to this. We're just looking at different ways to approach it. I'm going to go off camera whilst I fix my chair. So you carry on, Victoria. I think I might have put on some weight in lockdown. See you in a second. You continue.
Okay. Well, in this case, we are moving on to moving up the CFR level to another task. In this case, that can be found on first certificates. And here you can see that students need to fill in the gaps with words that they hear. In this case, the text is about puffins. Sorted, George? That was quick.
Sorted. Yes, you will notice, especially from B2 upwards, a lot of our tests, a lot of our tasks, there's quite a lot of natural history because it doesn't require much knowledge and it's sort of safe. It's not going to offend anyone. These tasks are very useful at lower levels as well, but you can make them more complex from B2 upwards. As you can see, we're paraphrasing the text, putting the gaps in the middle of sentences, so they've got to be thinking about their sentence structure as well as listening out for what they're listening out for. So really nice task type. And it seems like a really quick, easy task type for you to create, which it is one of the easiest, I think. But you do have to bear some things in mind. So moving on from puffins, Victoria, what next?
We are moving on to hippos.
Hippos. So we found a really nice text. I think it was about a boy giving a presentation to his class about hippos, something like that. This actually came in. This came in as a task from our team of writers a long time ago. It didn't make it past the first stage of creating things, of creating some tasks that we go through, because here were the questions. You'll hear a boy called Rob telling his class about some research done for his biology class on hippos. We would like you to try and answer these, okay? In the chat box with the numbers. So Rob says few people realize that hippos are one of the most animals in the world. Number 2, Victoria.
An adult hippo can be as heavy as 3 small.
Hippos are able to, when they are almost totally underwater. Hippo's sweat is in color. Number 5, Victoria.
Rob didn't know that is hippo's favorite food.
Hippos sometimes use their to frighten off other animals. And
Rob explains that hippos tend to live longer in...
Right, so we have a selection of answers up on screen there. So number 1, we've got dangerous, magnificent. That was good. Don't we know if that's justifiable? It's quite a subjective thing to say. Number 3, breathe. We've got quite a few breathes there. Number 2, cars. Number 4, brown. Interesting. Number 7, lakes. Tend to live longer in lakes. Great answer. Breathe, zoos, aggressive, yeah. Zoos, fish. Oh, fish could be one of their favorite foods. Yep, captivity, I think that's for number 7. Elephants, pink, dangerous. Yes, so this was for a listening task, okay? These are the questions. And one thing we always tell you, and please tell your students, they always have time before the listening. What should they do with that time, Victoria?
They should use it carefully to read the text and try to predict the type of words that they're going to get.
Exactly, use the time to predict. Alexander wins for the best answer to number 5, which is electric eels. Thank you for that. I think electric eels are native to South America. I'm not sure about that. But yes, what was the problem with this task, Victoria? Why did it not get past the first stage?
I think it was Gabriela who got all the answers correct without even listening to...
Exactly. Okay. Here is the text. Number 1, dangerous. Most of us got that. Number 2, cars. Some people said elephants. We had that last time. But how small an elephant? I said maybe a medium-sized elephant. Breathe, when they're almost totally underwater. Red, a couple of people got red for the sweat. That's a tricky one. Their favorite food is grass, apparently. Huge teeth. They use their teeth to scare people away, which are very scary teeth. And captivity. So... yeah, we got all of the answers to those, nearly all of them, before we listened. So it's not a very useful task at all. Is it, Victoria?
Yeah, no, we may tend to think that it's the easiest to design and produce and create, but we need to take into account that this can happen. So it needs careful planning again.
Exactly, Gabriela. Sorry, this was what came in as a listening task. And the point is that the questions, you could guess most of them before you even listen to the piece. So it's a very easy task to put together, but you do have to bear this in mind. When you've come up with your questions, have a look at them and make sure that that they're not easy to guess without even doing the listening, okay? So again, another thing to bear in mind. Sorry, we're not being very encouraging today, are we? Another nice gap-fill activity. This is more staged. Victoria?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in this case, it's a listening activity which starts with a warm-up activity, asking students to talk, to discuss, get some ideas, try to, again, anticipate the content of the listening task. Also, asking them for their experience that they can relate to the topic. And then once they are ready, they can move on to do the listening task, which is they need to fill in the gaps, basically with the words that they hear. This is taken from the BBC, 6 Minutes English. And then as a follow-up, we suggested using Padlet again to reflect on some of the vocabulary that they came across during the listening. So useful vocabulary, so a vocabulary that they have never heard before. They have to try and write a sentence using it.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think Padlet is one of the most wonderful resources. You can do anything with it you want, really. We visited a school in Portugal before lockdown, and the headmistress said they use Padlet to administrate the whole school, all homework, all communications with parents, everything. So if you're not familiar with it, please check it out. So I think that it has a vast amount of potential. And as I said before, I think combining different platforms, free platforms, is again a really nice way. It builds on builds real life skills for our students. And if you're doing a timed assessment, it can help reduce the opportunities for candidates to cheat. Perhaps they have their input here and their task here. Again, using timed tasks for Kahoot reduces those chances as well, if we're talking about receptive skills. A follow-up, is this the same one, Victoria? No, this is different.
Yeah, it is a follow-up of the listening. Here they need to record themselves expressing how they feel and telling their classmates about something that makes them feel better. And in this case, you can choose, there are different options. Here we used either VoicePies or Flipgrid. And then you can turn these again into a listening comprehension task, because you can ask questions, comprehension questions about what students have recorded.
Flipgrid, we've spoken about this, I think, in our Assessing Speaking Online. Flipgrid, again, I've heard great feedback from teachers about Flipgrid, using it to structure the whole class. So they give their instructions, students give their answers. It might be quite a nice way to run a little listening activity or a listening assessment. Taking it up a level, Victoria, this is a nice activity.
Yes, here we are going to ask our students to read and listen for gist. We're going to divide our students into different groups. One of the groups is going to focus on facts. The other one is going to talk about feelings, and the other two will have to identify positive and negative aspects of the summertime clock changes. Time clock changes in general. We're going to give them 3 newspaper articles that they can find online, and then a short video. And then they have to read the texts and watch the video, come up with their ideas or extract ideas, talk about them together in breakout rooms if you are using Zoom, for example. If not, you can maybe set up mini groups on your platform. And then regroup and talk together about facts, feelings, positive and negative aspects as a whole group.
Lovely. And I think that's it. Before we move on to looking at more resources, a few people have said, please can we have the slides and handouts? I think once everything goes up on YouTube, you can then download things from YouTube. We might be behind on 1 or 2. We're doing a lot of webinars at the moment. So some videos I think are up, but I will make sure that all the material gets there and you can download from the videos on YouTube. Okay. And a webinar on Padlet. Do you think we could do that, Victoria? Maybe. We'd need a bit more of a focus. I think it'd be a bit tricky. We'll do a whole week of webinars on Padlet. This is a lovely, lovely resource. Talk us through that. Victoria really likes the photo on this one.
Yes.
Oh, eels. Are they electric eels?
Do you think they are eels?
No, I think they're just normal eels. What's good about Breaking News English, Victoria?
Yeah, in this case, we have the text, the script moves up. So it is a nice activity to help our students build their confidence in skim reading and fast reading as well.
And you can adjust the speeds, can't you?
I think so.
Yeah.
The
So
A-level.
it reads like an auto cue. It's be a really nice way to test gist, skimming, reading for gist. Sorry, I interrupted you, Victoria.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
That's
what
it.
I was saying. Yeah.
Helping school further helping them with listening generally. I don't think you can quite see the link there. Listenwise.com, I think it's called.
Yeah.
A variety of subjects, and again, it grades things for you in terms of level. So check that out. This is a really nice way to give them exposure to different accents, especially at lower levels. Higher levels, I think there's enough authentic material for you available on the internet. Lower levels, this is nice. It has lots of scripts. It picks out the vocab for you and gives a little quiz afterwards. And you can choose the accent that you want the script to be read in. In our listening exams, we use a variety of native accents. So various North American accents from all over the US and Canada. We'd have Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Southern English, Midland English, Northern English, Australian, New Zealand, maybe South African. So it's good to make sure that students have been exposed to these different accents. We don't want them to freak out in a listening paper saying, what is this person saying? And it's a really good way to help give them some exposure to those. CNN, Victoria, more ideas?
More ideas to get your students familiar with different accents. In this case, CNN 10 minutes. The good thing is that it's authentic listening, and you can link it to classroom projects that you are doing with your students. Groups can research different stories and present them to the class. So again, integrating different skills. And it allows also for a bit of differentiation, because students can watch the clips maybe different times, or they can even, some of them, ask questions to the others. So it's a nice way to work on news and authentic material.
Yeah, I think sort of a 10-minute session, you could structure a whole week around a 10-minute session. I used to use the BBC 1 Minute. Is that next? Yeah. I used to use the BBC 1 Minute news at the beginning of classes with B2 up, I would say. Really nice, quick fire listening activity. You prepare a couple of questions, a couple of gist, a couple of specific questions. Really nice way to start a class, and making something like that routine and get them routinely listening to stuff. So we know it can be difficult sometimes to get them listening to stuff that isn't just Netflix or songs. Songs do have their place in the classroom, but perhaps at higher, perhaps less so as we go up the CEFR. Again, I think this is abc.net for some Australian accents, some exposure to some Antipodean accents. Breaking News English also has this functionality. Victoria?
Yeah, you can accelerate the speed, make it faster or slower, depending on your student's level. Try to make it always sound natural. But it is a nice way to scaffold maybe the listening process. So building
stage the listening, exactly. Okay, and so to finish off, please check out the Cambridge University Press website. Supporting Every Teacher has a huge amount of resources, tools, and advice to help all of you with teaching from home. And please take part in our survey, which I think comes out with the follow-up email, just to give us feedback, because the more feedback we get from you, the better we can make these sessions. And if you'd like to sign up for user testing and research with some of our digital resources in their early stages, that is the link to sign up there. If you have any other questions, please ask us now. We've still got 5 minutes. How did that happen, Victoria? On Tuesday, we went 5 minutes over. It's probably you.
Remember that I had this problem at the beginning with my connection, so maybe it was that.
Yeah, connection wasn't great on
It
Tuesday.
was our problem there.
So, any questions before we finish off? Sorry we couldn't go into a lot of detail, but I hope it has been useful. I think to take away, use can-do statements, really think about what you're testing, why you're testing it, and then the most appropriate way to test that. Patricia, yes, no. I think we're talking about sort of integrated skills tasks there. There's always a place for integrated skills. As we said, sometimes they're harder to create, can be harder to mark. But as we said, there's no right or wrong way. Well, they could be. From what we've looked at, there's no right or wrong way to test things. You have to look at the advantages and disadvantages of each.
George, I think there was a question about sources for younger learners. I think we included the link of CBBs in our handout.
Yep, the handout, I've given you all access to the handout, and again, it will come in the follow-up email. There are lots of links on there, everything we've spoken about today. So all of the links are on there. CBBS is great for young learners. World of Fun is an excellent website with lots of different resources for young learners. And for listening, Karen Saxby's website, Anne Robinson and Karen Saxby. I think Karen Saxby is karensaxby.com. She's one of our authors on the exams and on our material for CUP. And luckily, she's also a very good artist. And I think she has lots of, well, she has, 10 to 20, maybe, black and white scenes that you can download. And you can use those for listening, similar to the young learners task, like the colouring exercise. It's a really nice, easy one to do. And they're all black and white, so you can download those and use them
for colouring, as a listening comprehension for colouring.
Yeah. C1 and C2, Maria Kahneman, we did a session last week on reading and use of English at C1 and C2. That's on the website, on YouTube, and we will be doing listening on Wednesday next week. So we'll be focusing much more on the higher levels in those two sessions. The Australian site, I think it's abcnews.au.
Again, I think it's in the handout.
Again, all of this is in the handout. Everything we've looked at is in the handout. Oh God, wearing headphones for too long makes your ears hurt. No? Wearing them all day at the moment. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Just to finish off, the CEFR, which we always mention, please check it out. It's a very big document, but you can be selective, pick and choose, extract some of those can-do statements. And there's a YouTube video on applying it to your curriculum, which is very interesting. Again, available on our YouTube channel. Supporting Every Teacher, our website for the last two or three months, Victoria. Lots of great resources on there. And our teacher support pack is a big interactive PDF with links to everything. So please download that. Is that everything? No.
I have the exam preparation support. Practice Makes Perfect, which offers lesson plans and also teacher tips, and World of Fun. This is one of the websites we were talking about for young learners. And also exam boosters are downloadable for free for A2 Key, B1 Preliminary, B2 First, and C1 Advanced.
Excellent. And if you go on our website, if you go to free resources, our colleagues in Cambridge have been writing lots of lesson plans during this period with an online focus. It's quite a lot for A2, B1, B2, maybe 7 or 8 for C1, I think. So download those. They're designed for online or traditional teaching, but again, they've been designed with the online focus in mind. So download those, please. Okay, well, thank you all very much. IELTS, there's plenty of material available online for IELTS. And in terms of the can-do statements, there's not a huge difference. There's more academic focus with academic IELTS. But I think from a linguistic point of view, the tasks used in IELTS are different because they can assess across a range of levels. So you can look at those a bit more closely to see how they are structured. But I don't think anything that we've said today would be unuseful if you're preparing students for IELTS, and good luck. So thank you all very much. I hope it was useful. What is today, Victoria? Thursday. I hope to see you all in our session on listening at C1 and C2 on Wednesday, and then we have speaking at C1 and C2 on Friday. We will think about a webinar on Padlet, Natalia. It might be, well, maybe a few webinars on Padlet. I don't know. It depends. Yeah, different ways to use it because it's such an open, sort of platform. We have included lots of examples of how to use Padlet in our other webinars, focusing on specific levels and skills. So check some of those out. Okay. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely rest of Thursday and Friday, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.